and welcome to Joy on Paper. My name is Bria Burton. I am the guest host, filling in for the amazing Patsy Gill, and this is Sci-Fi Hour. I am so excited that I get the opportunity to chat with two amazing sci-fi authors, and we're going to just get right to it because we have on the phone one of our guests. His name is Edward Sands, and I would just like to introduce you all to Edward, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I am thrilled to be chatting with you after we just had the amazing opportunity to meet in person at a writers' conference. And Edward is your pen name. So would you prefer that we continue speaking as your pen name, or would you like to be referred to as a different name?
Yeah, the pen name is just fine.
Okay, awesome. I bring that up because a lot of the listeners are writers, are readers, and they are big fans of such and such author, and sometimes they don't even know the author is actually using a pen name. And I'm going to just start with an extremely personal question. Do you prefer not to have your real name out there? Is that one of the reasons you did a pen name, or were there other reasons?
For me, actually, the goal was just to try to stay humble.
I love that.
Novel came out when I was a teenager, and I learned pretty quickly about the temptation to start thinking about any kind of book success as part of your identity.
That is incredible. I love that answer. And so, Edward, we are talking sci-fi today, and you initially had a fantasy novel that you published a few years back, but in more recent times, you've been doing short fiction that includes quite a bit of sci-fi. Let's talk a little bit about your journey as a writer. So, have you been writing since you were a kid? Have you been, and let me mention to the listeners right now that some of the stories we're going to be talking about are featured in magazines like Havoc, which is a sci-fi fantasy flash fiction magazine. A story, and I'm going to read the title to make sure I don't mess it up. I just lost it. Tell us the title of the story you just sent me.
The End of Everything.
The End of Everything. So short story featured in a flash fiction literary magazine. And tell us a little bit about your journey and what got you into fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, so I've always loved reading, and I've always dreamed of writing the kind of books that I love to read. So I started writing my first novel when I was 14, and it was picked up by a small publisher when I was 19. So basically out of high school, I thought I was just going to be a full-time author and tour around selling books. But
let's pause there for a moment. You were 14. Yeah. Did you started the novel at age 14 and you finished it by the time you were 19 and got a publisher?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is such an amazing story. I knew a little bit, but not as much in detail. So what was the title of that novel that was published?
The title of that one is Kestrel's Midnight Song.
Kestrel's Midnight Song. I love your titles, by the way. Okay, so 19-year-old you gets picked up by a publisher. Did you have an agent or just a publisher?
I did not have an agent. It
was
a small publisher in Connecticut.
Okay, wonderful. And so your first novel is published at 19. Tell us a little more about that journey at such a young age. This is not the common story for authors that I speak to have published so young.
Yeah, so I just started at the local county fair in my small town, and I did a bunch of pre-orders there and then shipped out the books once they arrived with media mail, which was kind of fun because it resulted in a 20-foot receipt for all the shipments.
A 20-foot receipt that I'm sure was at the U.S. Post Office printing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That probably was interesting for them.
Yeah, and so then I just started doing book signings wherever I could, wherever they would have me.
Mm-hmm.
Went from there.
Okay, so that was your first novel, and then did you publish any subsequent novels with this publisher?
I didn't publish any more novels with them. After that, I started to have to enter the workforce with a more traditional job, and that slowed my writing down for a while.
And that, I think a lot of the writers listening will probably relate to that part. And do you mind me asking what type of day job you had?
I ended up primarily working as an electrician.
Oh, that's awesome for a sci-fi writer to have that kind of job. And what a necessary job out there. I mean, pretty much all jobs are necessary, but in the sense that you are doing something extremely valuable for modern society, I will say, in electricity. So how long are you continuing even now in that job, or is that something that you no longer do?
Currently, I'm not working as an electrician. I work as a machine operator, but
okay.
We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. And so I mentioned you and I were able to meet in person. So just this past weekend was a writers' conference specifically for Christian authors, but it's a sci-fi, fantasy, horror conference, very niche conference called Realm Makers, and I was there continuing to hone my own sci-fi craft. What brought you to Realm Makers, and when was the first time? Because this conference has been going on for quite a few years. What led you to first end up at Realm Makers, and then tell us a little bit about how it went this year?
Yeah, so I think I originally heard about Realm Makers just through mutual friends who are also Christians writing the speculative genres. And the first time I was able to go, I believe, was in 2018.
Okay.
And it's always lots of fun and great way to make connections. And I'm always inspired to write as soon as I get home, which is great.
Awesome. And is that how you felt when you were there this last weekend?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. What were there any highlights? Just any tidbits that you took away that really stuck with you? Something someone said, a speaker or fellow author that you met? I
really enjoyed Alan Arnold's continuing sessions.
I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about his session really stuck with you?
Just the encouragement to write and to not worry about how the writing is going to fit into market demands or the kinds of things that really take you away from the creative process.
Mm-hmm. And do you happen to have any temporary tattoos on you right now? I know this is a strange question.
I did have temporary tattoos on, but I ended up wiping them off because I had an in-person interview that I didn't think it would be.
Okay. So to fill in the listener, so if you're watching, I'm gonna hold up my arms. I still have the temporary tattoos on from Alan Arnold's incredible workshops. The title of his workshop was Slaying the Seven-Headed Beast, and he gave everybody in the room temporary tattoos of things like the Minotaur, the Siren, the Dragon, the Hydra, the what were some of the other ones? My other ones fell off. Loch Ness Monster. And he used each of these illustrations of comparing these mythical creatures with something in an author's life that might be holding them back. The Minotaur represented fear. The Siren represents distractions or things that draw us away. The Dragon, I'm blanking on what the dragon was. The Hydra really stuck with me because the Hydra is being overwhelmed. And so the reason he asked us to put them on is to watch them fade away because they're temporary. None of us got tattoos that I know of while we were there, actual tattoos, but these temporary tattoos are going to fade away. And so the point he was making is watching us visualize, these things disappear and the idea that we are called to slay these beasts. And so it's this awesome visual, and I imagine that stuck with you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I could recognize many of the beasts that I've battled in the past.
And so As we talked at the conference, I'm not going to put you on the spot in the sense of you don't have to tell the whole story, but one thing that I found absolutely endearing about you and your wife was that the two of you met at this very conference. Was that in 2018?
That was in 2021.
Okay.
It is a cool story.
Okay,
Yeah.
So do you mind telling even a little piece of it? Because it was the most adorable meet cute I had ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2021, the night before the conference, I was laying in bed and just feeling deeply lonely for whatever reason. And I prayed a very simple prayer. I prayed asking God for a companion. And I felt this incredible peace and confidence that the prayer would be answered, which is highly unusual for me, at least. So I went to sleep, and then the next morning I hopped on the plane and kind of forgot about it. I remembered it, but I was focused on the conference and thought, that'll be nice someday when it happens. And then when I landed, I walked onto the shuttle, and there was my future wife on the shuttle. I saw her, and everything came rushing back to me, and I knew that she was the answer
were
to
there
prayer.
angels playing harps? Like,
I was honestly terrified. I remember thinking something like, I didn't mean now, I'm not ready.
Oh, I love that answer. Wait a minute, hold on, this is too soon.
Yeah.
And so she actually shared with me a couple things too. So if I could add this piece to the story where she said she looked at you and recognized you. So you were recognized as the author who had published, the fantasy novel at 19.
Yeah.
And how that must have felt for you is what I'm curious about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went and sat down. I actually sat down behind her because I was too afraid to talk to her. But she turned around and struck up a conversation, and she ultimately said, "Oh, I know you. You wrote Kestrel's Midnight Song." And she said she read it and she liked it. And that was definitely it. I definitely wanted to marry her right then, because that had never happened before either.
Okay, yes, I love that. And one also just side note is that your sister-in-law, her sister happens to live in the Tampa Bay area where I am. So I'm very much looking forward to hopefully getting the opportunity to meet her. It's such a small world because I know you're out west. But getting to chat with you and your wife was an absolute delight at the conference. And so I'm very thrilled that we have you here now. So let's get into, I want to talk about the story that you sent me that is featured in Havoc online magazine, and they also do print anthologies of story collections. Primarily, I think they're more known for I don't know that they do daily. Do they do daily flash fiction?
They do it 5 days a week.
5 days a
Monday
week.
through Friday.
Okay, so I believe the website is gohavoc.com. You can get weekday flash fiction, and it's incredible stories on there. I had the privilege of being accepted in 2019. A short story of mine, a flash fiction piece, was accepted to Havoc. So fellow Havoc author here. And when you sent me your story, I was enraptured. Do you have any objection to me reading the first paragraph of this story?
Oh, not at all. Go ahead.
Okay. It starts, "It hardly qualified as a graveyard. 19 graves in a single row, no fence, no road, no flowers. The foliage grew unchecked. Raw boulders from the nearby stream served as tombstones. They didn't need markings, for each grave contained the same person. Me." Whoa. Do I want to read the rest of that story? So you hooked me right away. And this is a 1,000-word story or less. And it is complete. It is tight. It is raw and intense. There is so much going on. So tell us a little bit about this story. What led you to write it? What gave you the idea? And repeat the title one more time, because I thought I had it in the heading, but I don't. So I don't want to mess up the title.
Yeah, the title is The End of Everything.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, so the way Havoc works is they have different seasons with different themes. So you kind of have to start with the theme that they give you, and the theme for that season was stories that sing. You had to write a song or write a story inspired by a song. And so the song that I started with, was "Somewhere Only We Know" by Keane.
Ooh, great song.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, had you tell me how many short fiction pieces have you had with them? A bunch, just this one, or you have quite a few?
I've had 3 with them.
3 with them. Okay. And just to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of what it's like to be an author submitting to literary magazines, whether online or otherwise, tell us about that process a little bit. Do you have a bunch of short stories that you just kind of spray out into the online realm of different magazines, or do you kind of go one at a time? What's kind of your submission method when you've got short stories?
You know, I don't have a specific method. I tend to just start with a moment of inspiration, whether that happens just from what I'm thinking about or a dream or something else, and see what I can make out of it. The nice thing about Havoc is 1,000 words is not very many, so it really forces you to tighten your writing and make every word count. Good practice.
Yes. and I'm glad you mentioned that, because writers who are listening, it's a great exercise, even if you don't publish. It's a great exercise to write 1,000-word story or less and work on tight writing, work on powerful emotional impact in a short amount of words. And this story, you've really nailed it here for me personally. It very much was deep emotional impact. And I was following with what Havoc's doing this week. I believe I saw something where their stories, if you want to read their stories, you have to be a subscribed member. If it's a story from their catalog, if you want to read the daily story, it's free. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you can go to their site and read the story of the day, Monday through Thursday. Was it Friday?
Friday.
Yeah, and but if for example you want to read my story back from 2019, you have to be a member and get into their catalog that way through subscription. I believe I saw something that they are opening up their whole catalog this weekend. Did you happen to see that same thing? I want to make sure I tell the listener correctly.
I saw something about that, although I thought it was last weekend, but I could be totally wrong.
Okay, so that may have just passed. Well, so I will mention that they do that periodically. They open up their catalog for anybody to jump in and read the back catalog of their stories. So, for example, to read your story, they could jump in there and go to the back catalog. Where do you have stories in other magazines that you'd mention?
That's a good question. I honestly don't think I have any other short stories.
So Havoc is your primary place that you're submitting.
Yes.
Yes, awesome. And do you find yourself regularly writing flash fiction in the midst of your novel writing? Because we're going to talk about the novel you're working on too before we say goodbye.
I do write short stories when I just feel inspired to, but I have been making a concerted effort to focus on the novel lately.
Okay, good. Let's go there. So tell us about the novel. What are you working on now?
I'm working on a science fiction novel titled The Splendid Grave.
You and your titles. I just love them.
Thank you. Yeah, and this was inspired by a dream that I had many years ago about convicted teenagers in a maze where they were trying to gather enough balloons to float to freedom.
And that was a dream. That was a dream that you had. Oh my goodness. I love talking to authors, especially speculative fiction authors, because I find a lot of camaraderie. I have dreams like that too. And I go, do other people have this experience where you dream in story, and often very speculative story? So it was so wonderful to hear your dream. And would you say what you're writing from that dream Is that just a very basic concept that you got to start with, or are you really sticking to this is exactly what the book is going to be? How much are you going to vary from what you remember from the dream?
The first draft of the novel followed the dream very closely. At the time, the title I had for it was Balloon Hunter. And once I reached the end, I actually tried pitching it to a few places, but it became clear that it had too many holes. So I started over, and over time, each draft has been more and more different, and to the point there are now no balloons at all in the story. So very different.
Don't you love how that happens as the drafts continue on? And so, do you have a working title for this book?
Yeah, the working title is The Splendid Grave.
Oh, I'm sorry. You've already said that. We've already gone over that. Okay, so did you, over this weekend, were you ready to pitch to an agent or a publisher, or were you more just sitting back, taking in some of the craft and life lessons of these incredible speakers that we had, or did you do any pitching to publishers or agents?
I didn't do any pitching. I didn't have anything ready for that. The goal was mainly to, form relationships and get some inspiration to keep writing.
Awesome. Oh, I just love that. And I cannot wait till that book comes out. Would you consider it like a YA dystopian, or what category is there a subcategory that you have in mind for it?
It is dystopian, probably suspense, you could maybe call a subcategory.
Okay, and targeting adults or young adults?
The main character is 20 years old, so I guess maybe somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between. Yeah. They sometimes call that new adult. So yeah, that could be. But often sometimes the publisher makes that determination once you get to that point.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing all this with us, Edward. And can you tell everybody where they can find you? And for example, where can they find the books that you have published? We've talked about GoHavoc.com. They can find your flash fiction if they become subscribers, or jump in on one of those free weekends or free times when Havoc has all their catalog open. Where can people find you and your writing online?
So I do have a website currently that redirects just to a Facebook page, but that's edwardsand.com. Kestrel's Midnight Song is still available as an ebook on Amazon.
Yes.
Yeah, and then also there are two different print anthologies that Havoc did that I'm published in. They are titled Stories That Sing and Vice and Virtue. And I believe those are available on Amazon. Stories That Sing
is one of the anthologies. Is that the anthology that contains the story that I just read?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's that's a wonderful thing for the listener to know. If you want to know what's going to happen with that short story that I just gave a little teaser of from Edward, go to Amazon and pick up the print anthology collection of flash fiction stories by Havoc called Stories That Sing. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. So I want the listener to know where to get it. Thank you so much. We're going to go to commercial break before we bring on our next guest, but it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, Edward, and I look forward to keeping up with your writing journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Take care, and we'll talk again sometime soon.
All right. You too.
Bye now. Okay, we're headed off to commercial, but we will be back with YA debut novelist Lindsay Llewellyn. Stay tuned.